Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I apologize for the late hour. We had a lot of issues going on trying to get on tonight for the program, but I am glad that I am here. And this is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session for Thursday night. We do this every Thursday night. We try to do it every Thursday night of the week so that we are able to connect with you all. We are almost actually an hour late, and I really do apologize. I had to use all of my technical know-how to get us on and hopefully to get us on to a point where we're not breaking up. But it seems to be going pretty well, and I appreciate all of you. If you have something that was going on tonight and this is not the time that we're usually on, I will understand. Please come back and watch us a little bit later. But I do appreciate you. I see Mom Michelle on here. Thank you so much for joining us. Tony, yeah, been waiting from. I have a 7 p.m. meeting, so wanted to get in early. Glad you made it on. Yeah, man, I'm sorry we got on a little bit late. We had a lot of issues going on. Calls and things had to be made earlier today about our internet and everything else. But we are here. We're here tonight. I wanted to talk about Africa. Now, there are many reasons that I want to talk about this, but predominantly because there's such a misconception and how the kingdoms and the peoples of Africa, how they got there, who they are. Most importantly, Nubia. You know, they have flooded the Nubian Valley. In 1970, they did it. The Aswan High Dam, and they had to resettle about 120,000 Nubian descendants. And one of the arguments that was made when they flooded the Nubian Valley was that they did it to hide connection between people of color, people of the lower Nile, and people of the northern Nile. And there is a lot of credible sources, research that has been done to verify this. Eric, I see you. Thank you for joining us. I know we are extremely late in getting in here tonight, but I'm glad you're here. You may remember a couple of months ago, we talked about how Egyptians were all over the internet because there was a documentary or something, I think it was produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, about Cleopatra. And then there was a controversy with, I forget what comedian it is, maybe you all remember, saying that Egyptians were Black. And people went completely crazy when they heard this. Egypt passed more restrictive laws stating that you can't associate Egyptians with Africans, with Black Africans. Many of them try to go to their Ptolemaic ancestry as if everybody in Egypt was part of the royal family. I still don't understand that one. And people really in denial of who they are. One of the issues that we have to face is that um, it's never been a great uh, uh, um, how do I phrase this without getting myself in trouble? It's not there haven't been many people who actually wanted to claim um, Nubia, the Lord, or blacks or other cultures um, as being intelligent, as being creative. If you were to, and I'm going to try to share this, if you were to go and look at a map of where Nubia was, where the king, where Kush was, you would start to see that it would be ridiculous for you as Egyptians or as people who are descendants of these cultures to deny, rebuke um, where you come from and who you are. But it is often done, and it has become more bold. It's been more emboldened lately within the last, I'd say, 40 to 50 years. The UNESCO, the UN, had people, and I have told you all this before, who came in, and multiple different historians claim that there was no way that the Egyptians were African, that they were more European than African. And it denied the idea of reality. There is a reality here, ladies and gentlemen, of where this place is. There's a significance, and we're going to talk about it this tonight, but we're going to get more into it over hopefully the next two sessions. But what I wanted to talk about was denial, right? Because at the center of all of this, at the heart of it, is denial, right? And so if we were to look at the kingdom of Kush, if we were to view these things, we understand that most of the culture has either been forgotten, was left out of history because it wasn't advantageous for people. Um, there were European Christians who wanted to deny it. Um, they wanted to remove the idea of the religions that were there. And so it wasn't until the Renaissance, that people even started to go back to think about Kushites, Nubians, and lower African cultures and what they provided. But even then, it was only in relation to how the Romans dealt with them. In fact, it wasn't until Napoleon's expedition, his famous expedition into Egypt, where it is said that his soldiers shot up Egyptian relics, including the Sphinx, and you can still see the bullet holes in the Sphinx right now from what Napoleon's soldiers did. But it wasn't until 1798, right, that people started to, as they explored, to realize that there was a different place other than Egyptian culture with the Nubians. And as we made further and further discoveries over the last century, and even now, we have proven that there were separate cultures, separate states. But here's the thing. We still are living in a reality where people are pushing the Nubians against the Egyptians, and they're making the Nubians or the people of Kush seem to be uncivilized, savage. And then goes that N word, that Negro word. Because it's been done to make us forget who and where we come from. But the truth lies within the map. The truth lies within what we see. I have another slide here. I have actually two, because I want to show the distinction here. You know, there are a lot of people who sit up and say that, well, we can prove that the Egyptians are European because when we look at their art and the things that we see, even though we know for a fact that much of the ancient art and relics were tampered with. And because a lot of it was found by Europeans, there were many Europeans who never wanted to show you Kushite findings of black skin, of black features. They also don't want you to realize that Nubia, Kerma, that civilization was present before the rise in Egyptian culture. None of those things are desired, right? People don't want to share those things because it changes your idea of world history. It changes your idea of what you see. Let's look at this timeline. So if we look at 5000 BC, right? And you see that the Nubian civilization in Upper Nubia originates. Okay? We know that there was no major political power in Egypt until around 3500 BCE. We know that. That is historically accurate. There is evidence, there's archaeological evidence. There are people who lie, who will tell you, well, give or take a couple of centuries or whatever, but that's really the truth. Around 3500 BCE, we get this idea of Egypt. But now you're noticing that they're saying that there were Nubian civilizations in the Open Nubia originates, all right? Around 5000 BC. So we're not talking about First Dynasty Egypt. We're talking about people who were there, a power that was there at a differing time. I'm hoping I'm not freezing on you all, but I can't tell. But I hope you at least can hear me. Let me stop this thing. Maybe that will. Oh, I hate this so much. Can you all still hear me? I'm lagging. All right. I hope you all can hear me pretty good. Again, please let me know. When you put out information that is important, things want to go crazy. Things want to go crazy because it's almost as the devil doesn't want you to put out this information um, and to teach these lessons. But we're gonna keep striving, keep going forward. Um, the issue is that cultures exist that we have ignored. So at 3200 BCE, trade began between Africa and what they call Africa, Ethiopia, Nubia, and Egypt. Now, I want to tell you this. The people who settled in the Nubian Valley, right? Prehistoric Egyptians and Nubians, these are all the same people, right? These are all the same people. These are people who were produced by um, the cultures that were there. All right, I can see a lot of you guys' comments now. So here's the thing. How much do you know about the Nubians? Somebody in the chat, let's make this interactive. Somebody in the chat, tell me, what do you know about Nubia? Give me a fact or two that you know about Nubia. You said the internet is protesting. Yeah, it's been a little bit of time. What do you know about Nubia? Anything you learned in school, anything you heard just in general passing, anything that has been said to you that may be wrong, may be right, but you feel this is what you know about Nubia. I'll give it about another moment or two because I want this to be interactive. I want you guys to all start to think. You said it's a river valley civilization in Africa. Well, okay, that is true. That is true. Nubia was known for rich gold deposits. That is absolutely true. Look at my sons throwing this history out here. Anybody else? Anybody else? One more. Anybody else? Hey, don't feel bad, Mom Michelle. A lot of us weren't even taught our history completely. And a lot of us were taught parts of the history to actually dissuade us from even wanting to learn more about it. I would hope that it's not in America, but there are people who are on YouTube and things like that who and TikTok who actually think that it is part of America and tell you that it's a beautiful river. Now it's a beautiful river, just like the Mississippi. What that means, over my head, but they do it. Well, let me tell you this. Nubia historians have worked a fit on the history of Nubia on Karma period. They want you to not understand things. So what it was is that there was what is that cat's name? It'll come back to me. It escapes me. But there was a guy, a historian, right? Their archers were absolutely amazing in knowing it's a very strong military weapon. Hey, Dad. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I assume that you're saying uh their 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 bows, Sean. I think that's what you mean by their archers and things like that. Uh, because um, it was known by the Egyptian as the word Kaseti. It was called the land of the bow, right? Because the Kushites were very skilled archers. They were very great huntsmen. They were great warriors. Um, and it was significant because those warriors were often used in battles and wars, even as time went on. And so, again, we know this from the relics and things that have been found, excuse me, and from the things that have been passed, even through the Egyptian kingdom, the things that have been said about Nubia. But let's look at this whole idea of how they classified it and how the game was played, because there was a game played here, right? Um, we had an archaeologist, historian by the name of George A. Reisner. They decided that in order to dissuade black people from, and I'm going to say this because it is what it is, from studying about ancient Nubia or really looking into Kerma and trying to dissuade and again tell us that the Egyptians were the power in the area and not really be honest, right? Reisner put out and they dictated groups of people. If you were to go and do your study, you will find that there was an A group culture, a B group culture, and a C group culture. Now, they validated this by saying, we broke down the kingdoms of Egypt, so we can break down the kingdoms of Nubia, right? Kush. And the A group culture was what was considered to be the first powerful culture of northern Nubia. They believe that this culture flourished around the beginning when I showed you that timeline around 3800 BCE, right? 3800 BCE to about 3100 BCE is what is the time that they give for it. But here's the reality here. There is no distinct historical validated evidence that there were any groups that were different. Again, we're talking about savagery. We're talking about trying to minimize one culture over another historically to validate the European strength over the African strength. And so the A group, even though they had incense and ivory and gold, as my son said, and they were artisans and they were known for to be skilled, powerful people. They pretended that their kingdom only lasted so long, and around 3100 BCE, they just vanished. This is what George Reisner wanted to say. They vanished. They got sucked up into Egyptian. They became Egyptians, or they became a part of the Egyptian culture or whatever, but they just vanished from Nubia. Even though there's no evidence to suggest that that is absolutely true. What we do know is that Egypt continued to take resources and material and people from Nubia. We know that when we get to the B group, right, that people were there. They weren't nomads. They weren't just random people walking around in Kerma. These were people who were part of that culture of that area. And it wasn't until later on, years later, that we are now realizing that there's some deception here. There's no ABC group. There are people of Kerma. There are the Nubians. And to say that they eventually came back around 2400 BCE is again trying to dissuade from the idea of their validity and their value to give power to Egypt. You will hear some historians tell you that the C group Nubians were Saharan pastoralists. They were people who grew things, and then they moved into the Nubian area, and they basically became the new Nubians. It's fallacy. It's fallacy. There were migrations, as there always is in Africa, but the cultures were quick to have syncretism, where they came together. So the idea of different Kushites, the idea of different people is lunacy, but it again was created by a white European to dissuade us from the idea of where we really come from. Can anybody tell me, were there ever Nubian kings in Egypt? Were you ever taught that? I'll give you a moment. Anybody? Anybody? Well, I'll tell you, for because of time, that there were. I will also tell you that God, this thing really doesn't like me tonight. But I will also say that um we have to spend a little bit more time knowing the value of who we are as a people, as a culture, um, as a nation, as a grouping, as whatever they have defined us to be. It wasn't us that separated um, people or put them into groups. It wasn't us that did that. And so we are now at a situation where whenever we try to distinguish our history or talk about our history or say, hey, this is particularly of something that is of relevance to my ancestry, it's viewed as separate, it's viewed as prejudice, it's viewed as racist, it's viewed as wrong, it's viewed as militant, it's viewed as anything but what it is. But wait, we we teach so much of the history of European thought. We teach so much of the history behind all of these different things that Europeans came up with. The Declaration of Independence, the Magna Carta, right? We were taught about kings and queens that have very, if any, relation to us. But when we are presented with the idea of learning who and what our ancestors did and where we came from, then there is a problem. The pharaohs of Egypt understood the value of Nubia, of Kush. They took a lot of their influence from Kush. Um, if we really understand how they idolized and um, saw these people as amazing people, right? When they called it the land of the bow, the Seti, when they say this, and they give them the idea how strong they were as hunters and warriors, did we start to understand the importance of Kush? Lower Nubia and areas of it were also called by later Greeks the land of the burnt face. So they called it the land of the black people, the land of the blackheads. And as Egypt started to understand the value of Kerma, of Kush, what they did was they started to interact. They started to try to bring them in. They tried to grab land further and further south that was of value because, as my son said, that had gold, had value. Pharaoh Amenhotep back in 1504 BCE, right, went in to conquer. so that they could bring in all of this value beyond the fourth cataract of the Nile. We're going to get into the cataracts next week because I want you to see it. And we're having problems with the internet tonight. So I really want you to be able to see how these cataracts in the Nile played a part in how kingdoms were established and how things were done. But at the heart of it is a wealth building society. Nubia was a wealth building society. It is the reason why Egypt decided to use viceroys and put people there and known as the king's sons, selective rulers, given title to rule over Kush so that they could be able to bring in the gold and the products that came specifically out of the knowledge of these people. These are not savages. And I'm going to keep pushing that tonight because history makes us think that the reason why they are not important is because they were a savage, uncivilized, uneducated people. You can't be uneducated and uncivilized if you're building cities, if you have ways to get gold, if you are influencing other cultures. How are you uncivilized? And the centuries that have been spent between the Egyptians and the Nubians, right, being mixed together, goes back to the earlier problem that we talked about, right? Where Egyptians now are saying, well, we're not black. And then I'm even hearing historians who will come out and say, well, ancient Egypt was black. It would be as foolish as me saying that there is no African in my blood, despite the color of my skin, because some of my ancestors were European. So does that mean that I deny my African ancestors? Does that mean that I deny my African culture? That I only participate and learn my European culture? Because that's what I identify with? And then we go back into that problem of identifying and removing the idea of what we really are, what our genes say, what our ancestry says, and the negativity behind that. We know they were at the peak, the top of the Pharaoh's influence on Egypt, which came around Ramses II, right? Between 1278 to 1212, 1214 BCE, right? That was we worship the Pharaoh as a god. But even then, right, the Nubians were referenced as builders, as huge support. If you look at any of the pharaohs, the most influential pharaohs, they reference in their writing, in their history, the value of Nubia. How they learned to build temples based on some Nubian mentalities. But we lie. We lie in history. And I'm going to say that because that's true. We lie, we remove. It's very obsequious because we don't want people to know. We don't want people to know. Some of the pharaohs had their children educated by Nubians on how to do dig sites and how to build temples. But that is left. that's left. I told you all a couple of months ago about the Wadi Kubanaya and why people went to the Nile and the cataracts and the tributaries of the Nile. And they built cultures around those areas because that's what they had to do in order to survive at a very diverse temperature climate in Africa. Egyptian domination is not something that went on for thousands and thousands of years. At the most, we know that the Egyptians had an influence of control over the Nubians for at least about 400 years. As far as the pharaohs and the kingdoms feeling that they had control over the Nubian Valley. But as things started to integrate, as things started to get a little bit different, Nubia, because of its wealth, because of its knowledge, because of the knowledge that it was gaining even under the Egyptians, it grew. It grew even stronger into an even stronger kingdom. And again, we go back to those ABC groups because they wanted to assume that there was no knowledge here. But the elites, people who became the kings and queens and people of renown in Nubia, many times were stronger than that which was in Egypt. At the end of the 12th dynasty, Egypt decided that it could no longer contend with the influence of Nubia, and they withdrew. And they left. If I were to bring back up that map, I'm not because we're having this issue. You would see that the Nubian capital or place of reference, Napata. Napata was where the Nubian power went. It was the center of power in the south that even the Egyptian pharaoh had to reference. But again, most of this, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I'm trying to get you to understand is that we can't keep saying that these cultures don't matter. We can't keep going down this lunacy of assuming that these things don't have purpose or reason. These are great cultures, prosperous cultures, who we still benefit from their technology, their thoughts that were passed to the Egyptians and later to the Greeks and into the Romans. All of these things happen. But yet we allow ourselves to believe that our ancestry starts only at a certain place. This is the reason why I'm kind of going over this tonight. And I really wish I had my timeline because I want you to see some things here. If we built the Great Pyramids around 2700 BCE, but wait, there were temples and pyramidic shapes built in Nubia thousands of years before. The expansion and the ideas and the sharing of ideas, syncretism, is very important. Because if we're not trying to just conquer you, we're trying to learn from you, then we all grow. But now, in our history books, we're not taught this. We're taught that Only the Egyptians contributed. Only the Egyptians had the knowledge. And that's not true. Any thoughts? Anybody got any thoughts out here? I see still about 3 people we still got on here tonight. Any thoughts to what we've talked about so far? Nothing. I was trying to go through my note here. I want to since we're not going to be able to get into a lot of these maps tonight because of the way this internet is acting. We only ever skated past the kings of Egypt in school. Yeah, because very few cultures other than that are talked about, my son, and that's unfortunate for a reason. I want to get more into this. I just can't do it. A lot of it can be so confusing as I start naming off um, some of these pharaohs and some of these rulers and female rulers. And so we may have to um, push it off to next week. But what I will say is, I just want you to understand um, the power and the actual power and strength that comes from our culture from these areas. I think we need to do discussions um, on Nubia, on Egypt, on Ethiopia. Um, we need to talk about these cultures because the further we go into these things, the more you start to understand their relevance and why they are the way they are on the world stage today and why people still even care about it, right? Why people still look to these things. I want to touch on something else though tonight. I got a message from someone, and you guys know I never put people's names out because I it's good to ask questions, rather they be motivated for their own reason or whatever. But I got a message from someone who asked me why it is that um, we should teach Black history. And you say, wow, well, I mean, that should be pretty obvious, right? And this person went so far as to say, isn't Black history our history? And I agree with him. I said, you're absolutely correct. Black history is our history. And as I read through what this person was writing, I realized that they were talking about the view of race. And I'm going to say this again because this plays a part in our lesson tonight. When people start to categorize themselves, that becomes a problem. But we didn't do this. Our ancestors didn't do this. There were men of knowledge who decided to put us in these categories. There were the lie of race. If Darwin believed that all humans descended from a common ancestor, right? And believed that there was no racial hierarchies, where'd they get it from? And how did they use Darwin's theory? Because what they decided to do, right, was to say, well, if he says some things evolved, then could that mean that there was a man, right? And then it evolved into something that was more of a man. And so they still, even if they see us as a relation, they see us as a primal relation. And so we use these things, these I call it Darwinistic discriminations, to separate people, and then to use that to say when it's pointed out that we shouldn't share history because now we all are one, right? When you don't want to learn about the hardships and the headaches and the horrible things, then you bring everybody together. It's almost like the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Black lives matter. Well, all lives matter. But then when we say all lives matter, you don't want us to talk about the discrimination out here. So as I told this individual, there are things, right? There's Darwinistic discrimination. There's scientific racism. That scientific racism is one of the biggest issues that we have in the world. It has dictated our history. It has dictated our politics. It has dictated a lot of things in our culture. And they base it on using science to justify racism, bigotry. And if you were to look at any of the men who influenced Darwinism, influenced eugenics, fascism, you will start to see that these men were motivated by separation, by scientific racism. And so I want us to start looking at these things because the effects of this on Black history are wide. They are wide. The idea was to place the Europeans on top and anybody with African descent on the bottom. And we're still seeing it today. We're still seeing it with this whole identifier of Egyptians and Africans, and the Egyptians saying that they are different. Many of you don't know the name of Ernst Haeckel. He was one of the men who inspired Darwin. He was a biologist, and I've talked about him before. He's the one that came up with the idea of racial hierarchy. And of course, he placed his own culture and his own people at the top. A lot of you don't know about Francis Galton, who was a cousin of Darwin, and one of the main reasons why eugenics in this country that then led to eugenics being used worldwide and justifying Nazism. So when historians say, well, Darwinism in itself isn't racist, but it is inspired by racist people. The ideologies that were put out, that are still put out, are still affecting Black people of the African diaspora to this day. Because everything that is African or based in Africa or based of a dark-skinned African is seen as savage, wrong, less than. And so we have to start to do study and to start to mark these things as things that we want to cover and talk about and go into. You notice when I stopped trying to show you my timeline and everything, that all of a sudden the internet kind of stabilized. That was a lie, but it is just what it is. Are there any questions, thoughts, concerns for the people that I have still on? And please, if you watch this later, I know we came on later tonight. And if you have questions as you watch this later, please, please, please drop your questions in the chat, and we will cover those. But are there any questions, any thoughts, any concerns, anything that you may have in this last 10 minutes, since I can't bring up my maps and stuff, any questions that you may have for this interactive session in relation to Black history? I will entertain any question that you have right now. To clear up anything. If not, you know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start talking about something of interest to me in history. So if you guys have anything, please feel free to shoot it out there. Nothing. I don't know, Eric. I don't know if Israel is a terrorist state. No, I don't know. I think that they are a corrupt state. I think that they have done some corrupted things in their sovereignty, but terrorists, I don't know. Terrorism is a little bit different. I look at it as you're going country to country, not just one people, but you're terrorizing others. So I don't know. Okay, Teddy, what topic? I can't bring up my timeline, which is what I want to bring up, because as I start getting into all of these different pharaohs and kings, you'd be like, without visual. So whatever you want to talk about, whatever is Eric apparently wants to still see Israel as a terrorist state. Whatever you want to talk about, though, I'm open to. If not, I'll say this. We're gonna go a little deeper into Kush next week. I wanna go further into it and start breaking out the periods and some of the kings and giving you a better alignment. And then I think after that, we'll go into Punt, which again shows the value of how ancient Egyptians saw Africans, right? I ain't talking about the Egyptians today. Talking about people. So we'll do that. I guess you guys ain't got nothing, huh? That's okay. I think that I do want to go into Punt because the Egyptians called that the land of the gods. That's how much they reverenced. They reverenced some of these other African cultures. The Greeks, Herodotus, and different historians referring to Lower Africa in such grandiose ways and talking about how beautiful, how intelligent they were, how amazing they were. So I want to get into that because I think it's not often talked about. Israel, like any state, when the wicked rule, there will be weeping, similar to what we saw in the fall of the Roman Republic. Oh, don't know. Well, let me tell you this. There is so much wickedness going on, period, throughout the world, under this notion of imperialism and sovereignty. When you deal with those types of mentalities where people feel that they are the power, you're going to have evil things being done to people. So, all right, people. I enjoyed this session despite all of our technical issues and weird issues and things of that nature. I actually enjoyed this session. Um, I couldn't bring up some of the things I wanted to bring up, and I'm a little angry about that. But I think that you may have learned something tonight. And if you learned something tonight, I am ecstatic because I believe that that's what this is supposed to be about. Now I'm going to hit you with the other fist. We're trying to grow the Erudition Network. We're trying to grow the Erudition Network in a way that we can bring in um, more people, things, and so I I need your help. And for me to say I need your help is to say something because I typically won't say it. I typically will just keep on going and kind of keep some things to myself. But we need your help. A lot of the things that we do for Erudition, I do um, is provided directly out of our pocketbooks and directly um, to try to help people learn in ways that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of. Um, some of the things that we do that we have done, and so I want us um, to start getting that help, that we need to do better. Last week, as you know, I didn't really mention it on the show today. Not last week, this week was my 50th birthday. We put out Facebook does a thing where they want everybody to, um, what does the shirt say? Less than 1% of Americans have ever served, um, basically in the Navy, so that's what that is. Um, it's a nice shirt. Eric, my wife, bought it for me, but because she'll be mad that I don't show it. That's as much. See, there you go. That's the ones of Americans. But um, we getting back to what I was saying. We need your help. So if you find yourself, anything and everything is appreciated. I think my wife set a goal. She got on the other night and said $40,000. We want to start to bring in money and buy better equipment, get better things, backgrounds, ability to show you, to cut up video, to do some of the things that will help to folks to learn. We're not in an era too much where people like to read like I do, read books and books and books and books. But sometimes they just need a visual, and that costs money. And so we put out that advertisement earlier this week, showing for my 50th birthday. And I really do appreciate all of those. On the name, Pastor Razor, my Evangelist Juanita Phillips. Thank you all for your assistance and help. It will be greatly used. It's greatly appreciated, and it will be used to help us to do what we need to do for this network. People think that a little bit, when we say a little bit, we don't mean it, but we mean it, right? Whatever you can do, if you can do something large, that's fine. If you can't, that's fine too. Steve's mad because I'm out here sounding like a preacher, trying to get donations, but we do appreciate it. Please go on the Erudition Network homepage, and you will still see the advertisement that we put up. We'll put up more over the next week, over this weekend, over the next week. And we'll try to get more out there to you so you can know where you can give. But at the bottom of our ticker, You can send whatever you can to the Erudition Network through our Cash App, uh, the Erudition Network. You will see our symbol. And once you see that symbol, you know you're in the right place. And anything that you have will be greatly appreciated. Um, don't try to break your brain book if you can't. But we definitely would like your help and like your support as we grow this thing and try to expand it. All right, I've been here on my hour. On my hour. Um, as I said, I wasn't able to do a lot of things I wanted to do tonight because the internet was freezing. But I will say this: thank you again. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for all of those who sent happy birthday wishes to me over this last week. Thank you to those yesterday who sent anniversary, um, replies to me and Tina. We've been married for 24 years. We've been together a lot longer, almost 30 years, just under 30 years. So it's a long time. That's a long time. Long time. Now it's fine. But I love my wife. Um, and so I think that, you have to be able to love someone to be able to have, endure me for 30 years. But I love her. I love my kids, who will be back on here next week. My wife will be back on Monday. Please support them. Please, 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 please. Anything that you do helps, helps, helps. We buy cameras. I bought a camera a little bit ago, another next to go camera for the boys so they can be able to do their show. Um, it just helps us to keep this going as we reach people all over the world. All right, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you all for bearing with me tonight. I know I got a little sketchy there. Until I see you next time, uh, hey, go out there, go start looking up historical things on Nubia, on Kerma, on Kush, and come back next week prepared, and we can have a really, really good discussion. But until then, you be blessed. Thank you.